Hi everyone. It feels kind of strange talking to everyone in a webinar format, but nice to see you. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to the first event of the 2021 Innovation in Engagement Conference. My name is Kerry and my pronouns are she and her. For the purposes of visual impairment accessibility, I'm a white woman with brown to blonde hair today, and I'm wearing a white top and sitting in my attic room. I'm a freelance curator and I worked previously as the artistic director of Mansions of the Future in Lincoln, which you'll learn a little bit more about in a moment. I've been working alongside creative producer and former colleague, Caris, who you can see here, and Amara Spence, co-founder and creative director of Birmingham-based social justice organisation, Maya, to co-author this programme. This event really wouldn't have been possible without Caris and Amara's extraordinary enthusiasm, commitment and attention to detail. So it is with huge gratitude to them that I can welcome you all to these talks. Amara, Caris and I have been reflecting on the last year and a half. We've been thinking about sector recovery, resilience and community need. We talked about the immediate aftermath of recent global events, including both the COVID pandemic and the national galvanizing around the Black Lives Matter campaign. The dark shadow of these seismic societal changes presents an opportunity to consider positions of change. With this in mind, the conference programme will foreground practitioners who are interrogating, reimagining, and nurturing cultural and community organisations, offering provision which is reactive, sustainable, and accountable to the needs of the constituents they serve. The conference intends to foster national cross-sector learning and profile and celebrate innovative social and cultural organisations and initiatives which adopt radically inclusive and collaborative practices. Initiatives which present new ways of coming together, being together, and exercising solidarity amongst increasingly divisive global politics. Over the next 2 days, you'll hear perspectives, projects, and strategies for social change from creative practitioners, architects, charities, activists, policymakers, arts and community organisations. We are indebted to our project partners and funders, Arts Council England, the University of Lincoln's Centre for Culture and Creativity, as well as economic think tank Commonwealth, and Birmingham-based social justice organisation Maya. A further thank you to the Baltic Centre for Contemporary Art, who were keen to support the conference and facilitated the free Baltic bursary ticketing option. You'll hear more about the brilliant work of these partners within the conference programme. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off. So Fergus, who is in this kind of video as a panelist, is behind the scenes helping us with some tech support. So if you're having any kind of technical issues, you can talk to Fergus directly in the chat or pop your comments in the chat and he'll be monitoring the chat function and will kind of endeavour to help you. Throughout the conference, we'll also be joined by 2 Bsl interpreters who you should be able to see in your gallery view, Jenny and Claire. A huge thank you to them for their services. They are managing the interpretation between them and every 20 minutes swapping over. If you are hard of hearing or using this interpretation, we encourage you to click on your image and then follow the 3 dots in the corner of your screen and pin them to your screen. We're also joined by visual scribe, illustrator Becky Bryson, who is taking notes throughout the event and kind of capturing some of the takeaways, live illustrating parts of that today, but then finishing up beyond the conference And these illustrations will be shared as a resource to all attendees and uploaded to our website following the event. So if you wanted to kind of nosy what Becky's up to, you can click on her screen. Throughout the conversation, please do feel free to chat amongst yourselves or leave comments for the speakers in the chat function, which is kind of in the middle bottom of your screen. And if you have questions for speakers or the host throughout the event, please pop these in the Q&A box, so separate to the chat function, and these will be fielded by the host after the presentation. So we'll do our best to get round to all the questions. Please just pop them in the Q&A. Before I introduce this morning's session and our amazing panel, I just wanted to offer a little context to the lineage of this conference and where it's come from. So alongside the redistribution of our assets, a publication and a film, this conference marks the key outcome and the final gesture in the Mansions of the Future legacy agenda. Mansions of the Future was an Arts Council Ambitions for Excellence funded arts and cultural hub in Lincoln City Centre, set up by Claire Cumberledge and Rebecca Blackwood. Working with artists alongside local communities, the 3-year programme privileged social, site-specific and collaborative ways of working. So the building was brought to life through a public programme of national and international public art commissions, communal lunches, exhibitions, talks, workshops, and events. Mansions of the Future was a time-sensitive project. Many of the team are with us behind the scenes and in the audience today. And through this event, we intend to situate its legacy and learning within broader, critical, cross-sector conversations. This morning, to open the conference, I would like to share the Mansions of the Future legacy film, which has been developed and produced by Fergus and Pete. So hopefully that will give you a little more context to where this has come from and what Mansions of the Future was. Lincoln could not deal without a place like Mansions, a community hub where creatives or anyone can come together to express themselves freely without restrictions.
Mansions does something special. I love how selfless everyone is.
I have always been an introvert, but I have grown in confidence within the walls of Mansions.
I am honoured to be a small piece in the puzzle which illustrates the magnitude of how many hearts have been touched by Mansions.
My name is Kerry and I'm the Artistic Director at Mansions of the Future. I think Mansions is about fostering community cohesion and just celebrating the culture of the everyday.
The thing that makes Mansions of the Future special is the space that communities have to come together, to meet, to collaborate, to be creative and to be supportive.
The ground floor of the Mansions of the Future building was designed and equipped by Catherine Bohm as part of her inaugural commission for the project called Culture as a Verb. And something that Catherine was very much keen on was that the space would be there to showcase and publish culture existing and thriving within Lincoln. So it was going to, much like the programme and the roles, grow and develop over time and be shaped by the individuals who were using the building.
So there are two distinct kind of strands at Mansions of the Future of programming. One is the public programme, which is entirely free. It's curated and developed by the team. and it consists of national art commissions, talks, workshops, communal lunches and events. And I'm really interested in learning about a place's geography, history, kind of heritage and its communities, and just thinking critically about what is relevant here. See, the other strand of our work is the Takeover Programme, and it was part of Catherine Boehm's inaugural commission. And Catherine thought about how the space is used and who it's for, and the Takeover Programme invites community groups to make use of the space for free for social, cultural or educational activity. It's incredibly popular, and it means a whole range of community groups use the space, from disability theatre to YMCA to adult bereavement classes and inclusive textiles, so a whole range.
I think that the way that Mansions tries to interact and approach the communities that it's working with or working within seemed to me to be really quite innovative when I first came across it. I'd actually never heard of Mansions before, but then in my time being here, I slowly started to realise, or actually very quickly started to realise, how deeply invested it was with the people of Lincoln and the community that surrounds it.
So we work with artists and communities to develop projects, and we think it's just really important that all of the commissions and our public programme is site specific. So all of the nationally based artists who we're working with are invited to Lincoln to spend time with the city, understand its history, its heritage, meet local people before they develop a proposal for the city. So we're really thinking about what is relevant here.
I think it's been a really good space for experimentation for artists. So because the space has been available for free, that makes a real big difference for artists to come and experiment with new ideas, new events. I've run workshops here that I probably wouldn't have been able to do anywhere else, because I wouldn't have been able to sort of afford to rent a space when something's a bit experimental. So I've had quite a few projects that are new that I've been able to try out here, and that's been amazing to be able to do. And I think other artists have felt the same.
I don't know. I quite like it raw as it is.
Maybe like you could have some of it as a salad and then some of it as sauce. Like maybe you could like
rub the lemon. No juice comes out. Look at this
like
thing.
this would be like a little salad
Rubbish.
bowl.
The thing that made me want to get involved with Mansions was because, firstly, it was an accessible space. I'd already done a math class around disability, so I knew that the space had a lot to offer and the people had a lot to offer, and I just wanted to get involved with that kind of atmosphere. And it's just really chilled when you come to Mansions, whether you're volunteering or participating. So yeah,
definitely. Even though it's a very small hub, it's still a way where people can, it's still a place where people can expand their creativity in multiple directions. And I thought that's so important for the arts, and I thought this is a place that we've very missed in Lincoln, because I don't really think there's that many places where the community can just go somewhere that's free and just explore their own creativity in different events, small events, and artist talks as well, and just experience art in such a friendly and less formal environment.
I remember when I first started, and they all said if there's anything that you need help with, like your CV, or if there's any experience that you're really after in terms of like arts and culture, then let us know and we'll try and tailor something. So it's like your experience is fitted to your personality.
As much as we give, Mansions gives infinitely more, doesn't it, I think?
Yeah.
So at Mansions we communicate a lot with our volunteers, so we talk to them a lot about what they want to get from the project. A lot of institutions, I think, have closed doors when it comes to volunteers, or they can have, and volunteers can feel like they're perhaps a number or one of many, where we try here to treat everyone as an individual and give each person a particular role that might suit them. I think from the very beginning, I realised that Mansions was very different. Just be really sorry to see the end of the project. The people that I've worked with here are people that I'll never forget, and the hard work that they've put in has taught me so much.
It kind of takes the pressure and intensity out of the idea of creativity and kind of culture, which I think sometimes can be really heavy subjects and kind of experiences for people, or scenes that people feel that they're excluded from, which, you know, they shouldn't feel like that, but I think people do feel excluded quite a lot of the time from, you know, museums and art galleries and those sorts of spaces. So I think it's been an incredibly inclusive space and a really diverse one, and just a really capacious one as well, just very open and super welcoming.
The main thing is that everyone's welcome here, and that's a really genuine thing as well. It's true and honest. Everyone's welcome through that door downstairs, and it feels true when it's said.
I'll miss it because, as I say, of the variety and the diversity. We had conversations here that I wouldn't necessarily have anywhere else.
Working at Mansions of the Future was a real privilege, and I think the project is an incredible example of what's possible when you invest time and energy into a city and its communities. It's very emotional it's really emotional to see that back, actually. Thank you again to Fergus and Pete, who pulled that film together and spent a lot of time in Lincoln. Just really grateful for that asset. It was a time-sensitive project, and I guess that film is something we'll cherish forever. So I'm glad we could share that with you today, because it was the film only landed on our desk this week, so I'm glad we could share that this morning, and I hope it gives you a little bit of context to where this project, this conference, has come from. It feels important for us to situate the learning from Mansions of the Future and situate the learning of everybody who was involved with that, who was part of the team, within broader conversations, and that's part of the intention for this event. So the conference provocation, which you might have seen on the website in full, has been divided into 5 core themes over 2 days, and that's just the hope that we could make it more digestible, I guess. The 5 events are On the Front Lines, Architectures of Change, Young Ones, Democratic by Design, and Digital Infrastructures. We've got a bonus conversation between Director Sarah Monroe of the Baltic Centre for Contemporary Art and Head of Learning and Civic Engagement, Vicky Sturs, and that one is tomorrow morning. Today, I'm delighted to host On the Front Lines. This morning, you'll hear from organisations and individuals exploiting their civic role and responsibility and closely aligning themselves with an agenda motivated by the well-being, education, social and cultural lives of their local constituents. We're hoping to consider what can we learn from the successes and challenges of community organising. And what can we learn from locally informed public programmes? Thinking about resourcing and nurturing regional community networks. I'll just introduce each of the speakers. First up, I'm delighted to be joined by Andre. Do you want to give us a wave? Yes. Andre is an architectural designer, researcher, and social activist based in Walsall, UK. He works to help shape places by co-designing with communities. His practice, Kiondo, explores how we might create more sustainable, joyful, and equitable spaces to live and work around the world. By weaving deep partnerships between people and places. We're also joined by Charlie Gregory, Curator at the White House. Hi, Charlie. The White House is a space for communal and creative activity located within Dagenham's Becontree estate in London. The White House invites artists to live and work in the house, exploring new ways to collaborate with the local community by becoming their neighbours. Charlie was previously the director of the New Bridge Project, an artist-led studio and gallery space in Newcastle upon Tyne. She worked there for 5 years and has held positions with Berwick Film and Media Arts Festival, Wonderbar, D6 and AV Festival. Finally, it's my pleasure to introduce Ed Wallace. Hi, Ed. I'm gonna say, give us a wave, but you're already there. Ed Wallace is Director of Policy and Engagement at Locality, the national membership network for community organisations. Locality supports community organisations to be strong and successful so communities thrive. Ed leads Locality's influential policy, research and public affairs work, and the development of Locality's membership network of over 1,000 community organisations. He was previously a director and senior research fellow at one of the UK's leading think tanks and a political speechwriter. Each of the panellists this morning, Charlie, Andre and Ed, will share their work and their experience with us for about 15 to 20 minutes each, and then we'll have time for more of a discussion and questions. Andre, I'll hand over to you. Thank you guys so much for coming. Honestly, it's our pleasure to host you.
My first thing is, can everyone hear me? This mic setup looks a lot better than sometimes it actually works. So just checking that. And just really nice introduction. I really loved the film. I thought it was really powerful. Hi guys, my name's Andre Reid. I'm a designer with a background in architecture and experience in many different fields in the creative sector. I'm a bit of a, I guess, polymath or jack of all trades. But essentially I've spent the last 9 years just trying to create opportunities for people like myself, or maybe not so much like myself, but just really want to create a change in the world, to have opportunities to do that. And I do it through creating spaces and bringing people together. So from 2014, 16, setting up Black Tape Studios in Birmingham, which was a 3,000 square foot media space, multimedia space in the town, just outside the town centre, to co-designing retail spaces, to where I'm at now, which is working with communities in Kiondo. I'm really just trying to learn how we together can make more joyful, enjoyable places to live, where we can be with our families, creating things that no one would ever imagine. So I'm gonna just get my, I've got a small presentation. I wasn't actually gonna use it today, but I think actually I'll use it today. So I'm gonna just get that up. So just a moment, guys. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Let's go into present mode. So just a second, guys. It won't be too long. Tech is literally doing its thing, slowing me down. There you go. Okay. There we go. You guys see this? Yeah. Everything all right? Seen?
That's good, Andre, yeah.
Cool, perfect. All right. So yeah, as I said, I spent the last 9 years in the creative sector just prototyping ways for different people to have opportunities to create positive impact in the world. And I wanted to, over the last 3 years, I wanted to return to my architectural training and try to use design as a way to kind of solve those problems, like how we might best get to decide what our world's look and feel like. I wanted to create a company to look at that, and that company was called Kiondo. Now, people always ask me what Kiondo means or like what it is. Well, put really simply, it's a basket. But really, it's about, it's an East African word for a basket, but it's more about joining hands to create something greater. It's about communities building something sustainable with the intention for it to be passed down to future generations. Building a Kiondo's a community activity. And it derives from a very specific tradition in East Africa, where women are essentially built these beautiful baskets by the elders of a specific tribe, and they're handed over on their wedding day as a kind of bag for life. So there's this coming together of a community as a symbol of what your life is to be, and that creativity, and it's handed over as an heirloom. So that led me to something we call like community-led design, and it means bringing people together to create more positive change. So at Kiondo, I'll give you a bit of a background actually before I even delve into this. So I started Kiondo about 3 years ago, just after my son was born and wanted to return into architecture and design, and started by just working with the everyday person. And I think this is an important thing to say in terms of like how we talk about our practices being on the front lines, is it comes from a very personal place of how do we also survive whilst doing what we want to do, what we enjoy and what we live by, what we breathe by. And my thing was working with people, helping people to kind of find solutions to the problems that they face in their everyday lives, where design can actually play a part. And that meant working alongside the everyday individual, whether they had a budget or not, to kind of find ways that design can play a positive impact in their life, whether it's redesigning furniture so that it was more accessible to their needs. Say, for example, if they were they had user accessibility needs, such as like mobility, such as not able to turn certain things or move in certain ways, or certain things such as spectral disorders, such as autism, how we design spaces in relation to that. And it led me down a path in terms of learning about how people in general have an understanding of design, have an understanding of the world around them and the objects that inhabit our spaces, and how we can better employ different processes to ensure that communities are more aware of the things around us and can make better design choices. And so it led me on this journey to how we thread like everyday people into the design processes, shaping the way that we live. And this means not just our spaces, so the spaces where we live and work, but also our products, the things we buy, interact with and consume, and the underlying infrastructures, our systems, which hold our societies together. So through this, we actually produce programs, workshops and events to foster greater community sustainability and cohesion, and use these programs and events and workshops as a design process and a learning process to bring people together through collaboration, co-design and co-creation. We want to essentially inspire people to find the solutions to the things they want to change and create the platforms to make it happen. Just remembering that we do this because we believe that the people should lead in the design decisions, shaping our future lifestyles, cultures, and environments. So I'm going to give you a little bit about what we've been doing, because it's not all been roses. It's been hard. But we've also had some really good successes over the last 2 years with COVID. Essentially in 2009, from working from 2017 when Kiondo was established up to 2019, we went through a growth cycle of working with individuals to working with community groups and community organizations, to then weaving relationships between corporate institutions and the community so that we can get people that work within a local area working with institutions to build solutions with them. And we came up to a transition point where we felt like the work that we were doing wasn't actually being translated for the long term. That sometimes organizations see the social good that organizations like Kiondo do, and other organizations such as like Maya, Mansions of the Future, beautiful projects that have a really good sentiment to how we work together as humans on this planet. But it's seen as like a tick box exercise. How do we bring something ethical in as a tick box? And because of that relationship that we saw developing with the work, I took a step back and decided I wanted to work much closer to home, which was in Walsall. I wanted to work in a place where I could watch the work, steward the work, and watch it develop, grow, and change, and by working closer to home, my personal relationship and my accountability also shifts to making sure that that work is actually truthfully reflective of the communities that I hope it to serve, and also that I'm rooted in it, so it makes sense. It actually works in real life. I can watch it happen. And so it started a couple years ago. I can never remember time since COVID. It's been terrible. But it started with first looking at land. Like, how do we start to look at the opportunities around us? And we started a bit of a little research group called Portable Land. And it's how we look at the different ways to unlock and connect the potential of land around us. The purpose of this project was to address the restricted access to land and potential food shortages over the course of COVID-19. And we built a digital community called the Urban Farmers Collective, made up of a series of diverse households from ranging across the West Midlands. So not just in Birmingham, but also outside of Birmingham and the surrounding towns. We worked together to identify different plots of land around us as a community and look at how we can reimagine and transform some of these vacant plots with different groups. One of these experiments, and Amara knows full well of this because she was there on the day, was building this grow room in Aston with a good friend of ours, Daniel Blyden. And he wanted to essentially look at his area and say, how can I kind of start to do more things here? How can I make use of some of these underused pieces of land, and how can design play a part? So we sourced an open source design online and worked out how we could modify and create a solution locally in this area that would help bring people together. Got it fabricated and put this together in Aston, which is in some ways a degraded part of Birmingham. It provides a communal outdoor space for growing fresh food, veg, herbs, and it's actually became a kind of an instrument within the Aston area where Daniel lives, to bring people together, to bring people from all over the community to kind of as a hub, as a central node. But looking beyond that, we started to look in Walsall in more beyond land, beyond food. In that way, we wanted to see land as a rich interwoven network of ideas, each rooted with a specific geographical location. And we wanted to find ways to highlight those ideas so that we could celebrate the value that they offer. And that led us to creating or starting what we called the abundance map. See, Walsall is one of those places with a ton of creative ideas that nobody really knows about or celebrates other than the people in the borough. And the abundance map allows us to highlight the creative people and places in Walsall, an area where the creative sector has been heavily neglected. So we wanted to create a tool that was fun and enjoyable to look at, not just a Google map, but something illustrated that actually paid away to not just the artists and the creatives that help generate the map, but also is a way for us to kind of re-identify and create landmarks, literally create landmarks of ourselves on the map. But when we started to look even closer past the surface level of who exists in Warsaw, and we wanted to say, okay, what about the smaller communities? What about the communities that go unserved, unnoticed? And how do we kind of start to look at developing platforms to support those groups? And so something we do at Kiondo is like how we prototype different ways of working with people. So prototype different platforms, whether they happen or not is a completely different thing. But in terms of how we test those out with the community and create different ways of interacting. And one of these ways was what it looked like to have a Black Creators Network in Warsaw. And we went through this process of developing, it's quite funny actually, but in response to what was happening at the time with Black Lives Matter, but also the systemic inequalities that still plague the town as like a kind of traditionally working class white town, which has a lot of kind of internal politics as well as geopolitics, which is still in play till today. We wanted to find out how we could provide a resource, a platform to kind of expose the diverse skill sets in the area and share resources and build up that community of creatives that we knew existed. And then onto the kind of prized possession, which is the People's Studio. So one of the main objectives of the project since, well, the campaign, which was Warsaw 2020 and the Transforming Warsaw Fund, was to look at how we could create a piece of infrastructure that would provide a blank canvas for people in the town to kind of reimagine what the town could look, feel like, be like. How could we kind of reimagine how we live and work in Warsaw? And as looking into the town and doing the mapping, we could identify that there wasn't a central resource or place for that imagining to happen, for that kind of working with that community of thinkers, creatives to come together and start doing that experimentation, that prototyping. And so we found a location dead center opposite the town hall that had been neglected for the last 10 years, had been derelict and empty because no one wanted to approach actually taking on a building in the town. And me being me, which is something sometimes we have to do, it's just take the risk and be that champion that just kind of shoulders that risk to allow people to push forward. And so from working from digital spaces, we wanted to find a beautiful central location that could do that. And that was the old Hogshead in Warsaw Town Centre, a grade 2 listed building that used to be a leathery, as a piece of what I guess we're calling now as a piece of imagination infrastructure. Like, how do we create tools that allow people to develop and grow forward? Just a second. Yeah. So as part of that, we secured the lease. One of our main things isn't to just secure a lease and to have a building that goes into kind of a period where it's flourishing and the community is utilizing it and finding out ways to develop and use this space, but actually a piece of infrastructure that can be permanently held by the community. So there's always been this aim to provide a space that the community will in turn own. So we secured a lease agreement with an option to buy and a specific kind of agreement that allows us to make alterations to the property and work alongside the landlords as well as external funders to develop that property to work towards what might be a community share model, where we hope for the local community to have literal buy-in to this space, which is sitting in the middle of town before the gentrification hits. And we've already started to hold a series of events, as in, we say hold, but really all it means is the community have basically seen this blank canvas that we've provided and said, can we do this? And we're starting to build programs and build up the facilities in response to how people are inquiring and looking or planning to use the space, rather than coming with a kind of pre-resolved design. We're allowing a period of time for the community to come up with ideas and experiment with this blank canvas. So this is some images from the UK Black female photographer's first exhibit with Bramley Burke, which was covered by the BBC and ITV last year. And another event that we had was feeding over 80 households in the Christmas period. Over COVID, as we opened up the space as a food pantry, as a central location in the pandemic. And I have some other images, but they're not in this slide. I would love to show you. But we've also started a lot of work around how we empower community voice and bring locals into like developing projects with, again, corporates, but in a way that is safer for them to lead. I'll have to talk about that another time, maybe in the panel. So I'm just going to kind of close off as quickly as I can because I'm sure I'm running out of time. But I just want to talk about this story about regeneration from the inside, and like this is what we believe in, and I believe this works by working with people from the ground up rather than from the top down. And I want to talk about how Kiondo actually do that, because we root ourselves in literally 5 principles, and I think it's important that everyone take this away in some way or form, because I believe it translates to all of our work. So these 5 things at the base layer, the first is that everything, our work should be research driven. It should locate the root of the matter and start from there. The second is holistic design, like to think holistically, intentionally aiming to create continuity and connectedness between different strands of our work. The third is healing. The work we do must heal and produce spaces for wellness. The fourth is mutual exchange. For us, this means equity, not equality, and we must create equal opportunities which empower people who have been systematically disempowered. And the fifth and final one is that we must ensure all the work we do is community-led, ensuring that people are given a voice in the process and delivery of change. And the one like biggest sentiment, call it the sixth one, that I want to just take away is that change starts closer to home, and it starts with us taking a personal journey and a personal step into the work that we do, to bring those worlds together and to make really effective, long-lasting change. And that's me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Andre. So much to unpick, so inspiring, but we'll move on and then we can have some more time for discussion at the end. But thank you so much for your time and sharing all of that. Charlie, I wonder if you wanted to speak next.
Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen, hopefully. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. Hello, hi everyone, and thanks for having me today. Thanks for inviting me, Kerry. I'm Charlie Gregory. I'm the curator at the White House, and I'm a white woman with long brown hair, and I'm wearing glasses and a black top, and my pronouns are she, her. So my job title is curator, but I think my role is better described as facilitator, instigator, supporter, organizer, fundraiser, producer, mentor, and administrator. So this first slide is showing an image of the White House, which is a 2-story traditional white building with terracotta roof, and there's some balloons tied to the fence outside. So the White House is based in Outer London, in the borough of Barking Dagenham on the Becontree estate. And it was set up in its current form in 2016 by Create in partnership with the London Borough of Barking Dagenham. And the space itself is based within a former 18th century farmhouse. So it predates the estate, which it is now a part of. And the estate itself was built 100 years ago. And it was, when built, the largest social housing project in the world. And if you're interested in the context or the data of the area, I guess, Barking and Dagenham is ranked by Arts Council as having one of the lowest levels of cultural engagement or participation in the country. It's in the top 3% of the most deprived authorities in England on the indices of multiple deprivation. And the last census data available from 2011 tells us that the level of new migrant communities living in the borough has increased by 75%. and it also has one of the highest concentrations of under 16s. So the population is rapidly shifting. It's young and it's diverse. So the White House itself, we operate as a public space for art and social activity, a space for making, for socialising and learning, with activities for, led and shaped by local constituents. So this next slide shows inside of the White House. It's an adult and 3 young people sat together having a conversation. The room has white brick walls and wooden floors with a colourful rug. So the space itself is arranged to speak to its domestic history, its past. Downstairs it has a living room, a dining room, a kitchen. Upstairs it accommodates artists and community members to live and work in the house with studios and bedrooms. So it feels like a home, which really helps in generating a safe, a welcoming and an inclusive space. It's something familiar where people feel like they understand the rules of engagement. They come in, they make a cup of tea in the kitchen, they drop in for a chat and sit on the sofa, they sit in the garden. Some people even take their shoes off when they come in the house. So the overarching aims and values I've tried to distill of the White House are to generate resources and facilities for its neighbouring communities and to build capacity locally, to generate activity that engages with its site and issues relevant and urgent to its constituents, to employ principles of mutual learning, cooperation and collaboration, and to create opportunities for togetherness, so helping to develop a communal language and shared understanding, to be shaped by the people that use it, to platform approaches that engage with identity and relationship forming, friendship and care, and to centre possibility, curiosity, and to challenge, helping us develop tools to collectively imagine alternative models and futures. And we aim to do this, we hope to do this through 3 main strands of activity. But I should say that they don't operate in silos, they intersect and they overlap and nothing is static. So it's very much an iterative and fluid process based on learning and responsiveness. So this slide shows the White House Poetry Circle. It's 13 people sat having a group conversation in a similar room to the last image. So the first strand is under the banner of the Front Room Programme. It's an ongoing public programme of constituent-led classes, workshops and activity. And Front Room is really a framework to train and support local community members and groups to develop and lead their own creative activity based on gaps that they identify in local provision. So Front Room aims to platform the expertise of residents within their own communities, build local capacity and support the development of cultural democracy. So the programme is really expansive. We've done loads of different things from arts and crafts classes, poetry, henna, gardening, cooking and community meals, home education sessions, accessible social groups, and lots of different youth activity from Dungeons and Dragons, young leaders, poetry slam. But I mean, the essence of the Front Room programme is that it's designed with people that come to the house and is then facilitated by them. Where needed, we provide support and mentoring or training in facilitation, grant writing, safeguarding, to equip them with the practical skills to lead on these programmes and to lead on the activity happening in the house. So this slide is showing a pantomime performance with artist Mchale. There's 2 actors in the foreground dressed as chefs, I believe. One's on their knee with their arm outstretched, and in the background, the 6 actors stood in front of a cardboard set, and there's a bright red carpet. So the second strand of what we do comes under commissions and residencies. And we commission in lots of different ways. There is not one size, one model. We invite artists, organisers, performers, activists, growers into the space to explore a certain provocation or to develop models of practice or to work with around a certain issue with a specific group of people. And our commissions and residencies are centred on social and culturally relevant issues to our neighbourhood and to its constituents. And they take a highly collaborative approach to process. Often they're open-ended. They're seeking to develop long-term relationships, research, and embed activity. And they are very much centred around process and a relational approach. So by that I mean how we connect and relate to each other, and then the role that plays in shaping our daily experiences. Sometimes the artists live in the house for short or long periods and often return. And this speaks to the original mission of the White House when it was set up, that artists become neighbours. So some previous examples have included co-designing and co-building a community garden with artists They Are Here, a socialist pantomime that you can see in the image, co-written, developed and performed by community members with artist Chad Mchale, a risograph billboard and paste-ups with a zine library with artist Saki Tami. But I guess all these things I'm listing are the quantifiable objects and outcomes produced. And that isn't necessarily what we're primarily concerned with. So I think that that is almost like a symptom of the institutions, of the structures and systems we're operating within, and the need to consistently produce, reproduce, and create outcomes to justify our existence. So we use the process of collectively making, thinking, and being together in the hope of generating something else, something that's beyond objects or beyond outcomes. And they're opportunities for personal development, friendship, strategies of caring for one another, for ourselves, and for the place we are and that we live. To imagine new tactics for solidarity and healing for the future. And I guess more simply, just hope and possibility. So I wanted to share a few examples of what we've been doing through 2020 and 2021 to help demonstrate how we work. So this slide is documentation from an art club Zoom session with Elsa James. It's showing 8 screens, yeah, maybe 7, 8 screens with young people and adults in holding masks, silver tinfoil masks to their faces. So through 2020 and into this year, we've been focusing on a partnership project with the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham's social care departments, and that's through an initiative called Newtown Culture. And that is a programme of cultural activity that takes place within adult and children's social care, and it's led by the borough themselves. So this partnership with Newtown Culture has connected us to young people accessing social care services, allowing us to work really closely with social workers, social care staff, and the cultural team as well, to set up collaborations with these young people and creative practitioners. So through this 2-year period, we've been developing various processes of support through creative development activity, and that is both intensive and durational. And we've done this through a programme of regular clubs and hubs for young people at the White House, some online and in person as much as we've been able to do, some in groups and some that are one-to-one sessions. And through Newtown Culture, we've led programmes that have supported, looked after children and foster carers, unaccompanied minors and asylum-seeking children and young people, care leavers and young people transitioning out of care, and young people with profound and multiple learning disabilities. We were really interested in this partnership. It has allowed us to explore the more formal structures of care through engaging directly with social care services, and how we finding a way that we can operate within them, or perhaps on the edges. And this has felt particularly urgent through 2020, with the social care crisis amplified during COVID. So we've worked with artists Elsa James and Carol Wright of Black Outside to host Art Club, an intergenerational after-school club for foster carers and looked after children. So this image shows an artwork made by young people in one of those clubs with Elsa James. It's a black and white archive photo of a town fair from the 60s or 50s, and it's overset with young people's colourful drawings. So Elsa James has been collaborating with the Art Club group regularly since autumn 2020, and that's been through a mix of in-person when we can and online when we've been in lockdown sessions. And the sessions have engaged with the identity of place, but also explored with the children what makes them feel at home and perhaps what doesn't. So through processes of making, such as collaging, illustration, writing, fashion experimentation, design, the group have been creatively examining these underexplored local narratives and thinking about inserting their own histories and experiences into these narratives. So they're now working towards a permanent crest or for the White House, so almost a signifier, a badge that will sit on the house itself and speak to their collective experiences. So this slide is showing documentation from Carol Wright's gardening sessions as part of Art Club. There's a larger picture of a map, a big world map, and lots of hands moving playing cards with vegetables and fruits around on it. And there's a smaller picture of some hands planting in a raised bed. So Carol Wright, who is part of Black Outside Collective, has begun to meet this year with the group as the weather has got better, because this programme is located within the White House garden, a community garden. And through a programme of growing, planting, research, cooking, walks, and mapping of cultural connections, the group have explored or begun to explore their own connections and experiences of being outside, thinking about processes of how we decolonise knowledge, ancestry, plant history, and to celebrate being outside in a safe way. So this image is documentation from Assembly Mixtape Club with Joe Nami. There's a larger image of a sound mixing desk and a smaller image of a young person with headphones working on a laptop. So we've been working with artist and composer Joe Nami to organise Assembly Mixtape Club, which is a collaborative platform for young people who are accessing social care services. And that initiated in summer last year, and it is ongoing. So Joe has been collaborating in different ways through intensive group sessions and one-to-ones with young people to explore open source technologies and creatively examining how music and deeper forms of listening, so politics of listening as well, can shape our experiences, our memories, our relationships and our well-being. And Joe continues to work with the young people, and together they're producing a sound work which will incorporate that shared research, those reflections and conversations with them and with social care staff. So this slide shows documentation from a session with Blinda's Rye. The photo is taken through an internal window, and it shows young people working on laptops individually. So writer and poet Blinda's Rye has been collaborating with a group of young women, again, who are accessing social care services. And Blinda's sessions have explored the spoken word. So using a range of creative and collaborative experimental techniques such as protest, cutout, blackout poetry to start reflecting on personal experiences of the last 18 months and imagine alternative futures. And her intention was really to generate a safe space for these young women to collectively explore dynamics of and structures of power, oppression, injustice, and through exercises such as writing personal testimonials, letters to themselves in the future. The aim was to think about mobilising their words, their stories for personal empowerment. And we are continuing to work with the young women to record their stories to create a series of podcasts. So Kerry asked me to think a little bit about some of the conflicts and challenges of this type of work for today, for this morning. So I thought I'd just run through some of the questions that we continue to ask ourselves when we're developing and delivering this type of work. Are we taking on the role of a statutory service with this activity? Are we upholding and reproducing an oppressive system? Or have we become associates of that system? How do we operate from within, but develop strategies of resistance? How do we create a collaborative and mutual experience between young people, the artists and social care staff? And who holds the agency within this process? And how can we begin to shift that? And we aren't trained social workers, so how do we effectively safeguard ourselves and the artists involved and the young people also? So, final slide, sorry, I'm probably running way over. This is the White House garden, and it's showing some young people running and drawing on the floor as part of a Newtown Culture session. So I've mentioned two of our three strands: front room, resident-led public programme, commissions and residencies, and the third is development. And that is embedded across everything. So it's personal, artistic, community and organisational development. So from instigating creative development residencies, mentoring, and bursary schemes, we're to support the development of local ecology and practice, to the support we provide to individuals and groups through the Front Room programme, to the programmes that we're delivering within Newtown Culture that generate that space for personal reflection and self-development, and finally to organisational development. So that really focuses on the White House itself and the future of the house, and looking towards a form of independence for the house, and that's what's next for us. So we have explored how we curate and programme around structures of care, but how do we implement this into institutional change and into a model of operation for the house? So the longer term vision for the White House is of one to become independent and to operate through a community-led model, one that isn't extractive. And we acknowledge the time, capacity, and resources that we need to do this in order so that we don't just replicate existing structures that are damaging and unsustainable and ultimately lead to burnout. Structures that don't instrumentalise communities, because there are real issues of power and oppression. So the power, it needs to be genuinely shared. And currently that isn't happening in a genuine way. and we need to be honest about that and acknowledge that. So how do we change it though? So 2022 will act as a fallow year to take stock, to take all the learning, the testing that has happened over the past 5 years, and to really reflect on it together, to really solidify relationships and think of a way forward of what the White House should be and how it should operate. And in the hope of creating a new structure together based on cooperation and a community governance model. So something that is not just in a community, but that is of it. Okay, thanks for listening. I think I've probably gone way over my allotted time. But this is our logo, the White House logo, and our website, which is whitehouseart.org, and our Instagram, you can find us at White House Dagenham. And I am handing over now
to Ed.
Ed, yeah.
Charlie, thank you so much. It was so generous and insightful, and I really appreciate you touching on some of the challenges of the work that you do. Ed, we'll hand over to you. Thank you so much, Charlie.
Great, thanks, Kerry, and hi everyone. So I'm Ed. I'm just going to share my screen as well. So hopefully this is going to work okay.
Yeah, that was working.
So yeah, so I'm Director of Policy and Engagement at Locality. So my pronouns are he and him. I'm a white man with I guess medium length brown hair and glasses, and I've got a shirt on that probably needs an iron, but I'm hoping I'll get away with it on Zoom. And yeah, I want to talk to you about the work that we do, which is all about trying to unlock the power of community. So as Kerry said in her intro, we're the national membership network for local community organisations, and we support community organisations to be strong and successful. And we try and do that in these kind of 4 ways that I've got on this slide. So the first thing is we provide very kind of practical, hands-on support for community organisations. We've got a regional staff team that do that kind of direct work with groups. We're a peer learning network, so we connect up organisations so they can learn from each other. So an organisation in Lincoln can learn from what's happening in Liverpool. We provide resources for local people to get involved and create change in their community. And then the fourth and final thing is that we campaign and try and influence to create a better, more supportive policy environment for community organisations to do the fantastic work that they do locally on the ground. So we've got over 1,000 members who are based in neighbourhoods across England. We tend to be located in our most deprived places and have that real focus of trying to transform their neighbourhoods. So they support local people in an area over the long term. So they've got that real focus on a specific community and a specific place, which we've been hearing about throughout all the contributions today. They tend to be multi-purpose organisations, so they can provide a range of different services and activities that respond flexibly to whatever it is that particular community needs, and really importantly that they build on the community's strengths. So across our membership, I think the average locality member provides 13 different services and activities. There's a real focus on community ownership, so lots of organisations will own local community assets and then use that asset as a way of generating an income to support those different services and activities. So lots of kind of community enterprise, community business focus. And they come in all different shapes and sizes. So many will be based in community centres. There's swimming pools, community gardens, libraries, community cafes, community pubs, all kind of provide a place, a centre for the community to come together and for the community organisation to do its work. So just to give you a few examples of those different ways that they work. So here's a picture of Bramley Baths in Leeds, which is, the picture shows kind of people jumping into the swimming pool. So this was a council-run swimming baths, historic Victorian building, which in the kind of austerity years of the early 2010s, the council was going to close, but the community came together, took over the swimming baths, and have kind of really transformed it from this kind of, quite difficult kind of failing service into this incredibly vibrant community hub, which is now kind of generating income to reinvest, and it's teaching more kids to swim than when it was a council-run service. Now here's a picture of Stretford Public Hall in Manchester. So this was a really important local building which was falling into disrepair, which the community came together to purchase. Andre was talking about community shares, that's what they used here. And now the building is kind of transformed into a kind of art space. It's got kind of small businesses kind of working there, room hire. It's returned to being a real centre for the community, and the picture shows, I think, a very good example of community social distancing photo op. Here's a picture of Hebden Bridge Town Hall, which is another really important local building which was going to be lost to the community until the community came together and it was asset transferred to a local community organisation. And so it's now become a really vibrant community hub, and people might remember in 2015 Hebden Bridge experienced really bad flooding, and this community building became the real centre of the kind of local response to that flooding incident. And then finally, here's another example. So this is Windmill Hill City Farm in Bristol. So a community-owned city farm, and it's a really important, local space where people come and visit. It's also got a community cafe. They've got a nursery provision there, and they run a few different services. One of which is what they call supported volunteering. So it's for people who may be kind of coming out of the criminal justice system or struggling with addiction. They support them to volunteer in the farm, and it's a really fantastic way of kind of building people's capability, getting people connected to the community. So this is our kind of key argument, I guess, that we're trying to make, our theory of change, that we believe that local community organisations are uniquely placed to tackle the current big social, economic and environmental challenges that we face. So I suppose if we kind of look at the long view of social policy, if we think back to 1945, that was very much about big state solutions, the Labour government post-war creating the welfare state. And then kind of zoom forward to 1979, and then the kind of big idea then was around, market mechanisms and bringing in the kind of private sector. But now I think the big idea is community power, and policymakers need to be looking to try and support community-led solutions to find the right answers to the complex challenges we face now. So to explain that in a bit more detail, I wanted to talk about Goodwin Development Trust, who is one of our members in Hull, just up the road from Lincoln. And here, this picture is of the Thornton estate where they're based, which when Hull was the city of culture, they kind of worked with an artist to turn the tower block into a kind of beautiful, multicoloured extravaganza. So their story is that, and I'm particularly showing this because this feels very typical of the origin story, I guess, of a lot of community organisations we work with. So they were formed by 14 residents on the Thornton estate in Hull back in 1994. And this quote from Stuart Spandler, who's the chair of the organisation, I think kind of captures it. So he says that what the residents on this estate did was band together and say, this isn't good enough. No one else is going to help us. No one else is bothered. We've got to do it ourselves. Let's not talk about it. Let's do it. And I think it's that really kind of proactive, can-do spirit which drives so much community activity. And so the key for Goodwin has been community ownership. So it's that idea that if local people own physical stuff, then you've got something which no one can take away from you, and you can use that as the basis for your work. It kind of really puts the community in charge, and it means you're not dependent on the whims of a policymaker doing something, or either at the local or national level, or a charitable funder and their priorities. You're in charge of what you want to do, because you know best what your community needs. Goodwin then developed a really impressive asset portfolio. So they use buildings to generate income that can invest in all the things that they want to do. So they now run 20 different services, from childcare to befriending, a doula project for young mums, employment support. They've got sports pitches. So that kind of real multi-purpose community hub. And actually what they've been doing more of in the last few years is community-led housing. I think this is something that we're seeing as a growing area for community organisations. So this is about building social housing in your community, because we know that local people have been shut out of traditional housing options. So providing housing options for social rent locally. So Goodwin have built these kind of modular homes. So they're built to the highest environmental standards, so-called passive house standards. And so Goodwin started with 5 modular homes and a kind of small plot of land, and to kind of test it, show they could do it. And now they're looking to build 40 homes. And I think, so kind of why this model works, and I think what comes to me from the Goodwin experience is that kind of sense of ambition for the local place. And I think what, Andre kind of talked about this really well, is that idea of the abundance map. I think it just kind of really shows that the ambition. And I think so often, quite a lot, the language that we hear can be quite disempowering. It's about, it's about needs rather than strengths. It's about places being left behind or forgotten. But actually, we know that there's kind of huge power in communities, but what it needs is organising to unlock it. So I think that kind of real ambition is for the local area is what drives so many of the community organisations we work with. But then kind of what's specific about this model, and why do we think it has those unique solutions, which are the solutions that we need for our times? I think it's because the complex problems that we currently face, if we think about, loneliness or long-term unemployment, they don't have just one simple cause. They're kind of multifaceted, interconnected. So they need a different approach, which is about trusting relationships. It's about power being widely dispersed, and it's about services being joined up around every individual. And you just can't do that from Whitehall, or often even from a city hall, from local authorities. You can only really do that from a very local level. The other important thing is about regeneration of deprived neighbourhoods. Our community organisations tend to be located in the poorest areas, and they play that really important regeneration role. So we've done work to show how community organisations act as local economic multipliers. So because a community organisation will tend to employ local people and use local supply chains, it means that if any money that they generate, any money that gets invested in them stays in the local area, circulates around it, and the wealth is spread around the community rather than kind of leaking out into other places. Then the third part of this, I think, is about voice, agency, control, participation, all those words which are to do with putting people in control of decisions that happen in their area, and really kind of building community power. And I think this is something that we've really seen come even more to the fore in the experience of the last 15 or 16 months, however long it's been. The slide shows the cover of a report we published about this time last year called "We Were Built for This," which was about trying to understand the community response to the coronavirus crisis and what we could learn from it. And "We Were Built for This" was something, a phrase which one of our members used when we were talking to them about it, which I think kind of really captures that sense of how, you know, over time there's this real stock of local relationships, networks, you know, those community assets, that kind of power, those different services, which meant that when that first lockdown hit, when the kind of crisis really hit, that's how organisations felt, that they were kind of ready to respond, and they really did respond kind of so quickly, so much quicker, we found, than the local public sector. And we're really able to, in a very agile way, transform services, because they were already working with lots of the people who, you know, might have found themselves vulnerable at the time. And we found that it has kind of started to create a real potential step change in some of the kind of community activity. So we're hearing a lot how, particularly at the local authority level, local authorities are kind of seeing their community organisations in a different light. They've got a much better understanding of the work that they do and the role that they play. There's more trust between them, and we've seen some really good partnerships forge. So we kind of think, and we use the term, that there's a community moment that's been happening over the last year or so. So the big question for us is, how can we seize that moment and really kind of use the opportunity to put community power at the forefront of our policy agenda? I think there are some opportunities at the moment with the government. We're hearing a lot about the term levelling up, and it can be difficult to see it as more than a slogan, but we see it as our role to do that work. And I think, you know, within that agenda, there are some opportunities for the types of things that we're talking about. You know, if we see it as being, you know, about an economic development agenda, which isn't just about London and the southeast or big city centres. It's about trying to get, you know, tackle some of our regional inequalities. But you know, we think that in order to do that effectively, it needs to have this community power right at the kind of centre of it, in order to make sure that, you know, new investment builds meaningful long-term change. We think you can only do that if communities are in charge of that investment. We're also seeing at the local authority level a growing Keep It Local councils movement. So we've been building up a network of Keep It Local councils who are committed to working more closely with their community organisations, not just kind of using those big outsourcing contracts which go to those big multinational companies. They want to work with their community organisations and unlock that power of community. And we're trying to inspire that growing movement. So just to finish, I wanted to talk about some of those opportunities at the the national policy level that we're trying to push for and explore as part of our campaigning and influencing work coming out of the pandemic, and how we really seize that community moment. So the first thing is to support a community-powered economic recovery. So as we start to move out of the pandemic, the economic recovery is becoming more and more at the forefront of the agenda. And there are a few funds and opportunities which the government has announced. So there's the Levelling Up Fund, there's the Shared Prosperity Fund, which is what's going to replace the economic development funding we used to get from the EU, the structural funds. There's also a community ownership fund, which is something which we at Locality have been campaigning for a number of years, which made it into the last Conservative manifesto, and that money was announced at the budget. So there's a big opportunity for community ownership if we can get that fund right. The second thing that we're talking about is about creating collaborative public services. So moving away from the kind of competitive tendering that tends to dominate a lot of the services which community organisations have to compete for. The pandemic introduced some flexibilities to how the system works, and government's announced the procurement bill in the Queen's speech. So there is an opportunity there in that procurement bill to build on some of those flexibilities which have been really helpful at a local level, to then try and create a better system in the future. And then the third and final thing is to try and turn the huge community spirit that we've seen over during the pandemic into long-term community power. And the key thing there is to have a devolution agenda which has kind of fallen by the wayside a bit, and make that the heart of the new Levelling Up white paper, which the government has announced, and created this new Levelling Up unit. So, big question, will the government take these opportunities? But we see it as our job to be optimistic about the possibilities, to try and tell our members' story in as kind of clear and compelling way as possible, to put it on the radar and communicate that fantastic work that's happening locally, and try and provide some practical policy suggestions to make sure that this big opportunity that we have, this huge community power that we see every day in our work, really rises up and is unlocked to reach its full potential. So I will stop there.
Ed, thank you. I feel like there isn't that little emoji where you can give a round of applause, but if you can just imagine one. I think we're all so grateful for everybody's contributions this morning. Ed, it's nice to think about this moment as actually an opportunity for this kind of revival in terms of a broader recognition of the value and the position of reactivity that community organisations are in, and how intrinsic their work is to a place. It's been really great. I have so many questions. I'll field a couple, and then if anyone in the audience has questions for the speakers, just pop them in the Q&A and I'll do my best to get round to them. Charlie and Andre, I'm interested in the kind of tension between thinking structurally. So things like hopes for democratized governance or working collaboratively and co-designing projects. The tension between this and like the reality of just kind of dealing with capacity and emotional labor. I wondered if you wanted to expand on that a little bit, some of the challenges of these ambitions, but yeah, addressing capacity.
I don't mind going first a little bit.
Thanks, Andre.
I think you're completely right. There's a huge, it's a resource management challenge. It's like a problem, really. As Ed said, it's a matter of organising in community. It's not really giving, the tools already there, the people are there, it's just organisation. Like, how do we do that in the best way? And I think I mentioned earlier also the members of that community that are willing to take risks, so risk management as well. Because ultimately that starts the kind of waterfall effect of people being involved and being excited to start doing more things locally. So for example, in our project, taking on the building instantly began to inspire local people to come by and say, actually, oh, someone local is doing this, someone's trying to do something. And that involves a conversation. But it's also, how do you have those conversations with everybody, not just the locals that you pass by, but also with like the local authority or people that represent those, or the commissioning groups that who represents those. So someone has to do that level of work, both on the ground, but also kind of strategically, how we build those relationships. And I found that the best way to do it is to be open, but also to be strategic about like outcomes, like where we want to go, and to build that vision collectively. So to spend enough time with people to work out where they actually want to be, where we actually all want to be together, and then find ways to translate that and communicate that, not just with words, but in form of media, in the form of events and creating experiences together, in the form of creating proposals, or even setting up a Zoom meeting where we bring people from the community in to present some of their own ideas to some of these organizations and individuals. So I feel like as part of that organization, there is a bit of platform building that's required. So we provide a bit of a stable base for people to explore these things, and that requires a lot of different ways of thinking. There is the community way in terms of how to keep things organic and make sure information is flowing. But the reality is decisions happen really slowly if you're waiting for everyone to respond. So there has to be a level of like systemic kind of company style, like organization, we feel, that helps direct things in a very kind of clean and organized path. So it's that balance between the organization and myself as an individual, kind of being personally invested in this project, and then the community as well, and how we manage that investment. We're still working on it in many ways. We're looking to develop a membership model, like a proper membership model, and look at how that evolves over the next 3 to 5 years. But ultimately it is a work in process. And also, I've got my little kid just here if you hear him in the background. So it's managing the realities of like daily life as well, parenting and all the other things. So, but what's amazing about this way of working, I find, is that you can bring the realities into the work, which makes it that much more real and that much more like rewarding when things turn out. So yeah. Thank you, Andre. I can see it's a real careful balance. Charlie, I don't know if you wanted to comment to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an ongoing challenge for us. We've tried to confront how we create a democratic model of decision making through programming, but it's how we then translate that into, the next thing, which is the entirety of the house and its operations, its governance, its, the fundraising, that just like being able to staff it and turn the lights on every day. How do we balance that and resource that? And I think, we've been doing lots of research and, well, pre-COVID, lots of research and visits to other community organisations to explore their models. And I think we are really inspired by cooperatives. That's become clear from all of the visits. And I think, one of the, the 7 principles of a cooperative, one of them is education, training and information. So I think that's really vital in how we, all members of the White House, of the community that are involved in thinking about the future of the house, that we kind of embed education, training and information. So actually, members are equipped effectively to contribute to the development and into that decision making. Yeah, and I think, to touch on emotional labour, I think COVID has really has kind of changed everything. I mean, it has for everyone, hasn't it? You know, we're not the only ones, obviously, but a lot of the kind of, you know, timelines that we had and original like visions and plans that we had for the house have just been thrown out the window because they just don't apply anymore. And I think, you know, we have now realised that actually these structures that we were using aren't fit for purpose anymore, and we really need to think, you know, that's why we've assigned 2022 as this year to take stock and have that capacity to reflect, to not always just be delivering, creating more and more activity, but how do we stop and create that moment and have the capacity to really set up this structure in a way that isn't damaging to people, that doesn't kind of, you know, take their energy, take too much of their emotional labor, because you know, it is hard work. It's all of this is hard work. It's you know, it's about about looking after yourself in order to carry on. And I think, you know, we almost had to unlearn everything we thought we knew during COVID about how we work and what participation is, how we work with people, because it didn't really apply, and that roadmap has kind of disappeared. So then you kind of become quite untethered, and I think that's when you start to kind of boundaries start to blur. And I think, you know, the essential thing within this work is setting those boundaries for everyone involved, so that there is a framework for operating within.
Thank you. It's reassuring to hear about that fallow year, for sure. Ed, maybe I'll pick one more of my questions and then I'll take a couple from the audience. I wondered if you could expand, Ed, on some of the challenges of regional networks are kind of maintaining this regional supportive infrastructure and connecting kind of geographically distant organisations.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think you know, there is a real opportunity around like building those kind of regional clusters of support. So, you know, we at Locality, we're a national organisation, so we bring all organisations from across the country together, but then we also do, you know, we have a real kind of regional focus where we connect people more locally to kind of share and learn and you know, build those relationships and hopefully inspire each other. And actually, I think just picking up on the previous conversation, provide some of that emotional support to each other as well, because, you know, it's obviously been an incredibly intense period with the pandemic, but it's also been, you know, that's come off the back of an incredibly difficult, you know, decade really of, you know, we've had austerity, we've had kind of, you know, huge increasing demand for services, you know, that kind of eroding of the social safety net, which has meant that community organisations have been having to kind of, you know, pick up a lot more kind of social support. So, you know, there was a kind of risk of burnout, I think, for community organisations, you know, without a global pandemic to respond to. So providing that, you know, emotional support and solidarity, I think is, you know, almost as important as, you know, practical, you know, you can learn from this thing that we did. And I think, you know, the challenges that the main challenges that we find are kind of always the same ones, really. There's funding. Someone's kind of mentioned in the Q&A about, you know, the need to keep kind of accessing funding, and, you know, that is kind of crucial because we've seen, you know, grants kind of slowly disappear over the course of the past 10 years, replaced by contracts which are incredibly hard to bid for. So those kind of that kind of shift is something, is probably the biggest challenge that we see to it, and one of the things that we're most kind of active in.
The question here, Ed, that follows on from that, actually, does Locality help local community groups with kind of writing bids to access additional funding?
Yes, that's the kind of support that we provide, because it's, you know, I think there's another question in the Q&A which is about the you know, the kind of priorities of different funders and having to kind of address those, which I think the two are kind of really linked, actually, that you know, there's so many different funds which will have a kind of different criteria, different kind of bidding process, different, you know, outcomes that you're kind of having to be measured on, and also often at kind of crazy timescales as well to have to bid for. So so providing some support and expertise on that, I think, is really important. And actually, I've talked quite a lot about what we do in terms of trying to influence government priorities, but actually working with funders is a really important part of that too, to try and make those kind of funds as accessible, as simple as possible, because, you know, I think the question that Rachel's asked is absolutely spot on in terms of, you know, the funders' priorities, you know, shouldn't be the priorities. They should be much more open and long-term and supportive of the work at a community level. So that's something which I find that funders tend to kind of get perhaps at a kind of theoretical level more than an in practice level sometimes.
Absolutely, and it touches on what Charlie was saying about where is that recognition of the value of kind of the intangible outcomes of bringing people together and supporting community work. I'll just draw on this question at the top by Colette, and in addition to that, Charlie and Andre, I guess I was thinking, maybe Charlie, I'll put this to you first. You hear a lot about the kind of red tape of local authority working, and I wondered what like working with the local authority looks like in practical terms, in terms of, and what that means for reaching individuals who you might otherwise not have been able to, but practically what that looks like. And then Andre, maybe you could answer Colette's question here, which is about any kind of roadblocks that you have come up against in terms of landlords and all that kind of red tape stuff, and any advice you would give off the back of those experiences.
Yeah, so I mean, I can obviously only speak to our experience of working with the local authority. So we work closely with the Borough of Barking and Dagenham, and most recently on the Newtown Culture project that I spoke about in my presentation. And actually that has been, it felt like a different way of working with the local authority that was really generative, and I think because it's set up in a slightly different way, where it's straddling social care services but also the cultural services within the council. So you have staff based within each service, which enables this kind of really quick feeding of information between and then back to us. So actually it's been really thought about by the person leading Newtown Culture, Marika, and that has enabled us to reach young people that we never would have been able to. So we have kind of direct contact with them through their social worker. So we're kind of creating, you know, videos and things that are being sent to these young people by their social workers, and then kind of encouraging them to get involved and engage with the creative activity that we're programming. And I think it's also something to mention about the partnership is it feels like it's working because actually the learning is constantly being fed back in. So, you know, we're debriefing after everything with the Newtown Culture team, with a social worker that then goes into the formation of, you know, the next programming and the next project. And you know, that then we're collecting feedback from the young people that's also feeding into that. and that's feeding back into the service as well through this Newtown Culture initiative. So it's starting to look at kind of shaping policy and shaping how those services interact with local organisations and partners. And I think, you know, Newtown Culture has also generated a really vital platform in enabling artists and social care staff to exchange practice as well. So to find that kind of that shared language, which enables you know, a more meaningful engagement and enables the right kind of support to be you know, created.
That transparency is really useful. Thank you, Charlie. Andre, did you want to speak to the question which is about the kind of pressures or roadblocks that you might have come up against, particularly in terms of space? I'll give a bit of a story because I think it's, yeah, it will help communicate it. So when we started the work towards People's Studio and the Transforming Walsall Fund, we started a crowdfunder initially to just kind of generate some activity, which it didn't generate a lot of money, but it generated a lot of social activity. So we had so much inquiries from people from all over Walsall, people that had moved out, all sorts, that just kept DMing me for about still DMing to this day, still receiving emails and letters from it. And actually, where the local authority played a part is right after that, we got very well connected with the local authority, not in regards to resource in terms of, oh, here's some money to do your work. Actually, it was more around political relationships. So building up reputation and rapport locally in that sector, in that area, in the public sector. And I would say that's been quite beneficial in terms of being connected and linked to the different opportunities that are existing in the borough and external that maybe the everyday person isn't aware of, which helps us act as a translator or kind of, I hate to be a gatekeeper, which is what we try to avoid doing, which is why we created the WhatsApp group. And we started to invite local kind of, how we see is the individuals, not the institution. So the individuals in the institution that are championing the change that they want to see into this group, and to kind of start disseminating some of the local knowledge that wasn't being disseminated before. So that's some of the things that we did. But one of the huge challenges we had at the beginning was being the right type of institution, right type of organization. So when I first registered Kiondo, it was a limited company, limited by shares, but we've always operated as a social enterprise. So we had this transition of how do we move to a model that was recognized as a social enterprise, whether it be a CIC or we go towards a charitable incorporated organization which is more charity structure. And we went through months of first sending off applications and sending off inquiries to the company's house, who told us to go to do the charity application, to do the CIC application. The CIC people told us to do the charity application. We did the charities application. They said, actually, it looks more like a CIC. COVID came. And the thing is, as a limited company, to transition, you have to send everything via post, which is another process in itself. So this is just the reality of it. And during the COVID pandemic, things were locked down. So the offices that handled the post for being converted to a CIC were losing mail, were not organized, all sorts. So we had a huge delay before we could transition to a CIC. So all the offers that we had when we originally did the Transforming Walsall Fund, from funders and organizers to actually support, which were kind of latched to this identity that we had to have, were on pause until that had happened. So we had to make a way over the last, I think from July 2020 to 2021, February, is when the actual transition happened. We had to find a way to basically sustain this building. So we had to negotiate a new relationship with the landlord, to say, okay, this is what we've got, this is the situation we're dealing with. So we had to find a way to negotiate with the landlord. And the way we did it was through research. So we researched a lot, and we came up, I think all of us have probably had to do this, maybe White House have had to do this in a sense with the COVID pandemic, is to come up with a very simple way for the landlord to win and us to win. So like a win-win situation. And like, how do you become their friend, not their enemy? So we negotiated at least like a kind of a portion of rent that could be paid for the COVID period
and kind of a renegotiation based on kind of our social outcomes, which we're reviewing this month. They're coming down to have a look at what we're doing, and they want to see how they can do more as like a landlord, which has been really interesting. But all in all, that sounds like a nice, joyful journey, but it's not. It's just a lot of hard parts in that, and a lot of difficulty and a lot of risk that you're kind of worried, oh, is it going to stay afloat or is it not? And so I'll just touch on maybe another point of that, which is the commissioning angle. So the way that we've developed like the sustainability is by building projects with local people, but working with the institutions again. So we're keeping that relationship, but it's like, how do we do it in a sustainable way? And so one of the projects is where we're just starting on and just about to talk about is a project with the NHS to celebrate unrecognised heroes, and not just the key workers that were recognised, but the unrecognised individuals. And it came through a key worker that was based in Warsaw that's also an artist, and wanted to look at how we champion that. So we worked through that story. We managed to bring them into these rooms with the directors of the budget for kind of the social kind of distributed fund from the local healthcare trust. And we managed to build a project literally in front of their eyes, which is going to last the next 6 months, potentially more, including murals and other activities in the town, by just working with individuals and building that connection, that trust between the commissioning groups and the individuals that sit in the town. And the biggest challenge or roadblock is proving that they can actually deliver the work, which is where us as an organisation and having that organisation plays a part, because Kiondo can essentially be the backative for this vision, because we've helped support it and build it into something that can be programmed and delivered.
I see,
And then we also have the expertise to support that individual in certain aspects. So actually we're helping frame an idea, we're helping to source the funding, but we're also helping to support in delivery. And so the people that are part of that process gain the experience. We also look to train, like everyone, like was said earlier, is local as much as possible. We have team members that are outside the town, but they always come to visit. But everyone that's involved in the project is local, and how we work through the project is that they gain experience by being part of those processes, and that they're able to start kind of continuing that journey after the project has ended. So we work with people over a long period of time to build those relationships. Yeah.
Thank you, Mchale. It's so fascinating, and I think you captured the complexity of the roadblocks and the kind of administration of it really well there. Thank you. I will just ask one more question, and Kiondo and Charlie, I wonder if in the meantime, a question for you, Ed, you could just pop like your socials in the chat so people can follow you. Ed, I'll just, if you could be quite concise with your answer and then we'll wrap up, but I just wanted to get this question to you. It's from Ian, and it says, how do you see your experience, the role of artists and arts organisations intersecting with the work that Locality does? We could expand that, but I'll just field that to you now, Ed, and then we'll wrap up and I'll let everyone know what's coming up.
Yeah, well, and no, it's definitely a big part of what the organisations we work with do. So I was just checking actually, and from our last member survey, it said that 51% of Locality members working with kind of arts and culture.
Wow.
Services. And I think probably in a few different ways, probably the two main ones that I can think of is as a kind of, I guess, exactly as kind of Charlie has described around the White House, and, art as a kind of, community participation, bringing people together kind of opportunities. So I think there is a big part in the services and activities. Also talked about buildings as well. So, lots of our members will have kind of managed workspace for and host small businesses, but also quite a lot of kind of artist studios kind of within community buildings as well. So yeah, a few different ways which I think that our members do support and work with arts and artists.
Amazing. It's great to hear that kind of relationship is being nurtured throughout the UK. Okay, just thank yous really, Ed, Charlie, Andre, thank you so much for your time. I think it's a privilege for us to hear from you this morning, and just really grateful for how honest you were with the kind of complexities of the work that you deliver. Jenny and Claire, thank you so much for your Bsl interpretation and for trying to keep up with my like really fast Luton talking. I've learnt myself, so thank you for your time as well. Becky, thank you for this visual illustration. You'll be able to see this. We'll share these outcomes with all of the speakers. Later today, we have our second event hosted by Amara Spence called Architectures of Change. And that features Glenn Jenkins, founder of Exodus Collective and Marsh Farm Outreach, Andre Anderson, headmaster of Freedom and Balance, and Melissa Mean, director of We Can Make at Knoll West Media Centre. That kicks off at 2:15. So if you have a day pass or attending that event, we'll see you then. But thank you for this morning, and thank you again, everyone. Bye.